Some of the statistics are fascinating. Only 1 out of 10 Americans dies wealthy, which means excess money that they can pass on to the next generation. And what I worry about is, I remember 2008 vividly.
Declines across all of the major technology sectors.
A few people that I knew tangentially in finance committed suicide. Men defined as a protector and a provider stopped being able to provide and protect. And so I do worry about that. Do not wrap yourself in your success. Wrap yourself in maybe how hard you work. If you are slightly competent, you have very few people who will compete against you.
Yeah.
As long as you are willing to do an irrationally longer and harder amount of work than anybody else. It's actually all it takes. This is literally what all the richest people in the world do.
Codie Sanchez, welcome to my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming down to Scottsdale.
I'm excited to be here. I was telling you, I grew up here, so this is my hood.
And then you ran away and left.
I did.
And I moved here.
You did. Yeah, too hot for me. You move in. I moved to Austin.
I was only here for 1 summer. It was horrible.
Yeah, it's a whole different vibe here. People say it's a dry heat, and that's how I know that they've never been here in the summer.
Yeah, they tell you it's a dry heat, and then you move here, and they're like, ha!
Gotcha. That's exactly right. It's right. But it's beautiful all the rest of the year. So if you can just live in the pool. I actually couldn't think of anything worse than a suit full-time in Arizona during the summer.
Yeah.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
Capital punishment.
That is capital punishment. Okay, I want to know more about your background because you're an extremely successful entrepreneur. How did that happen? Can you start from the beginning? Did you come from money? Did you grow it all yourself? How did this happen?
Yeah. Well, I have my mom sitting over here, so she always laughs when I tell this story. But no, I didn't come from money. My mom was a 30-year special education teacher, incredibly hardworking, master's degree, but really decided to serve instead of focus on making money. And then my dad, he came from a family that had to build everything themselves, really. And so his side of his family comes from Spain, and they moved to a place called Globe, Arizona, or Miami, Arizona, which is where copper mining is. And so his story is wild. I want to have him on the podcast at some time, but he didn't get a chance to go to college. He built up his entrepreneurial journey entirely by himself. He now has run and sold multiple businesses, but was the definition of bootstrapped, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And he had worked in a slaughterhouse for years and was kind of skiing across the West Coast for a while, kind of ski bumming and really good at it still to this day. But he has stories about, I remember this one story he told me about, he had a pet rabbit. And this was back when he lived with his grandparents because his parents were trying to make enough money to afford to bring my dad down to Phoenix, which is where they moved because there was more money there than in Miami, in the mining town. And he had this pet rabbit, and he would feed it every day with his grandpa. And then one day, after dinner, he went out to go feed the rabbit, and he was like, where is he? He's not in there. Well.
Oh, no.
I know. They had eaten it for dinner because the whole time they were grooming, the rabbit. It was a very big boy. But, they made their own wine, they hunted, and they raised animals to eat them. And so that is so different from how I grew up, where my parents, kind of gave me every opportunity they could. But, like so many of us, a middle-class family in the U.S. I think I really benefit from the fact that I didn't have a trust fund for sure, but I had a lot of love, no better parents in the world.
So what do you think your parents gave you that allowed you to become successful? Are there specific values they taught you, or did you have a whole bunch of jobs growing up or something? Did you start working young? What happened there?
Yeah, we have these 4 chairs at my parents' house. That they still have to this day. And I have a brother. And one of the coolest things they ever did is we sat in these 4 chairs almost every night after dinner, and we would debate. We would have topics, and we would not just talk about what happened that day, but why did you do that? What did you think about that? What's happening in this world? And those 4 chairs, I think, led us to have to stand up if we had ideas and back them up. You could say anything, but you better be able to back up your idea. And those 4 chairs kind of lasted my entire childhood. So one thing I would say is they allowed us to question things, but then we had to have a reason to do it. We had to be rational. I want to do the same thing with my kids. And then from a very young age, they did 2 things incredibly well, I think, in my opinion. One is they really taught me to love learning. You know, like my mom, I remember, would take me to the library every summer here in Arizona. You could actually do it with your kids. It's super cute. If you go to the Scottsdale Public Library, each summer they have a reading game. And it's kind of like Candyland. Like, you know, you skip around the things on the board game, and every time you read a book, you get, you know, part of the Candyland thing. And at the end, you get some reward from the public's library.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so I would go and read, like, I don't know, however many books I was allowed to check out, like 15 or 20 books at the time, whatever the max limit was. And she just taught me to read and really love it. And so that made me curious. And then my dad did a really incredible job, I think, of showing me what it meant to work hard. Like, he never called me a princess. It was always, you could be a future president. And then he made me do as many team sports as I possibly could handle. I mean, I hated him as a coach. I'm sure your dad was tough in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. My dad's a softie now, but he was really, I mean, it was super hard, always harder on me than everybody else, I felt. But now in retrospect, I'm like, what a gift. You know? And that, I think, led me to business, because I watched him, I watched my mom, and I was like, you know, if he can build these things, I should probably be able to build them. And because I'm curious and have this instilled learning in me, I don't want to go to my grave wondering if I had anything left.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, like, one of the things I've been trying to figure out as a mom is how do you, well, I think it's hard too as a female, or at least it's hard for me to, like, give enough negative pressure or something, enough pressure in general, maybe not negative pressure, in order to get people to strive to be their best, right? And so I think I had that growing up as well, which was like, I expect you to get A's. It was like, and if you don't get A's, then, you know, you're not trying hard enough or something like that. But there was an expectation that was almost like higher than what I was achievable. Mm-hmm. So, and like you said, recently, now that I'm older, it's like lessened. Yep. But throughout, probably till I was maybe like, honestly, 28 or 29, like quite recently, it was, I expect a little bit more than you're capable of. And that's like, I think I'm still trying to grapple with doing that to kids, because it's like, it's hard to strive for, but then I think you get such interesting results from it in a positive way. Yeah. So it's tricky.
You know, Chris and I have this saying, he's my husband, where he says for his parents, he's like, he's a Navy SEAL, or was a Navy SEAL. And so our joke is always, you know, to his parents, thanks for fucking me up enough to be a Navy SEAL, but not enough to be a stripper.
Yeah.
And I think there's like some component that's right. You know, you need some trauma. Like, you need a little bit of difficulty and trauma and strife and pushing in order for you to achieve anything. And if the part that's curious, and I'm not sure how to manufacture it. Yeah. You know, I didn't have it manufactured through a terrible, mean family, which is a lot of times how overachievers have it. And so the manufacturing for us, at least, came from really intense group sports. So can you get out there and can you make your kids sort of suffer in the Arizona heat and softball for 52 hours? Also suffering for the parents, probably more. And then, you know, simultaneously, my dad's a big hunter. And so, like this weekend, we're going on a father-daughter trip, and we're going to go fishing and we're going to go hiking. And so, you know, it would be camping and hunting and being out in the wilderness. And that makes, it's hard. It's, you know, it's not always the funnest. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't
like
know if
that.
Jordan's a hunter, but
I like that.
Maybe you could try it.
I don't know. His hair wouldn't be done properly in the woods, and like, who knows if that would work out. He doesn't watch these, so it's fine. I like, okay, team sports. I can do that, because that's what I've been trying to do. Like, how do you like manufacture trauma? It's like, you don't want too much, because that hurts. Yeah. But yeah, team sports, that's a good one.
Yeah, team sports, I think, were big for us. You know, the other thing that my parents really pushed on me sounds like similar to you is, you know, if right now you have a kid and that kid wants to stop something. Yeah. How can you have a family commitment? You know, I have a friend of mine whose name is Jane Brady, and she's the daughter of a billionaire, Joe Kraft. Joe Kraft. And I remember saying to her, you turned out so normal. You know, you're like very well adjusted. You're very successful. What happened? And she said, you know, my family had family mottos. And I remember the first thing my dad said to me is our family name means something. And here's what it means. And they had a family motto. And then it was, and then second was, you can't always be the smartest person, but you can almost always outwork everybody else. And that is what our family does too. And so she didn't have massive trauma, but while all the other little billionaires' kids were getting bought horses and houses and et cetera, she had to work in the stable to just rent to go be able to afford to do her horseback riding. And so, levels to the game, but I like this idea of, does your name mean something? And can you make your kids believe that mission? You guys definitely as a family have a mission. And so how do you make it supersede 3 generations, not just 2?
Yeah. What is that mission? Time will tell. If you guys want to purchase this magical supplement, see how it shines, and reduce your poisoning by alcohol, we're available on Amazon now. And if you type in after party and scroll around or go to fullerhealth.com or check the link in the description or pinned comment, it's there. Look at this packaging. It glistens. How extra is this? Can I do this without ripping? I can indeed. Here it is, after party. There we go. It's available on Amazon and I will link it below, but please reduce your damage from alcohol if you drink, because it's silly not to. There's a money back guarantee. It really works. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Okay, so where are you? That's a bit of your background. So what did you achieve?
Yeah.
Brag a little bit.
Yeah.
Go for it. I want to hear
this part. So today we run a relatively large portfolio of what I call boring businesses or Main Street businesses. It's really private equity 101. So we took all the lessons that I had learned from finance. I worked in asset management and at companies like Goldman Sachs and Vanguard and State Street for many years, climbing my way through the corporate ladder as somebody who knew nothing about it. I had no idea what a mutual fund was.
Yeah.
I felt really overwhelmed with money. I had that feeling where you don't know if your checking account is going to bounce or not. I'd be frequently calling my parents, asking them if they could put a little money in there because I couldn't quite figure it out. And then finally, I just said that I want to understand this language of money because I think it is the only thing that allows us to have power and agency. And if you're not rich, then you can't push back.
Yeah.
If you are rich, you can push back.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people today are feeling that for the first time ever. We used to believe the things they told us, which is that money is bad. You should not have an ultimate pursuit of money. It's just a tool. And you can either decide if you want those guys to have the tool or if you want to have it. And so somehow I learned that early from working in Latin America and Mexico and kind of seeing what happens to people who don't have money, but have other people who have ultimate power on them. And long, short, not good. And so I climbed up the corporate ladder at a bunch of these companies as somebody who was a former journalist, just really interested in what does it take to accumulate wealth?
Yeah.
Why do some people get it and we aren't taught it? And can it really just be that we should save our way and skip the coffee to millions? And the answer is fucking no.
Yeah.
Love a lot of, what Dave Ramsey talks about, but that's not enough. It's not enough to set a budget. And so finally, once I had done the corporate realm, I'm a wuss. I didn't want to leave a corporate job. It paid well. And so it took me 10 plus years of working in corporate finance before I really had become so unemployable that they were like, you can't just do whatever you want while you work at a corporation. Like, that's not how this works, Codie. And I remember Jim, the CEO at the time, had that conversation with me. And I was like, you're wrong. We should do this on the internet. This is where we're going. And he was like, get your own chips. If you want to bet, don't bet with my chips. And so I said, okay, that's fair enough, and started a private equity fund with a couple of other players, did that for a series of years, and then started investing in my own companies. And I did that for a lot of years quietly, like didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to be found out. And I thought it was maybe not that sexy to invest in laundromats and small businesses. And then finally, when I got to our bigger private equity company, once COVID happened and I couldn't run around raising money from investors anymore, I started talking about it on the internet. And that's how we have Contrarian Thinking today, which is a large media company, sort of with this one goal of ownership. Can we get people into the game of ownership? Because it's harder for people to take that away from you. If you have contracts, equity, then you have a legacy you can pass down and something that works even if you can't work. Yeah.
So did you start by building any companies first, or were there and then another question after that is how did you identify what to invest in?
Yeah, I built a lot of failed companies. I had one called Selling South that was sort of a media company focused on selling products and services to Latin America. It didn't really work out that well. I had another one called Threads Refined. It didn't work out that well. I didn't like that business either. I had built other companies inside of companies. Like I built this, we built $1 billion asset management company at a company called First Trust, where they had $0 in Latin America when I started. And that business did well. And so I'd really built other people's businesses, plus failed because I played way too small the other times. Like I was just too scared of somebody finding out and getting rid of like the job that paid me a lot of money and my golden handcuffs. And so that is why I realized, well, if I could just buy some businesses instead, because maybe I'm not good at starting them. I know how to grow a business. I just might not know how to start one. And so then I started buying my own businesses. And the only way I knew how to invest in those was I copied other people's homework. A lot of times when you don't know what to do, what's the best thing to do? I think it's first you imitate, then you iterate, then you innovate. And people get it wrong today. They start with innovation. They're like, I'm going to come up with this new crazy app in my garage. I'm going to sell it for $1 billion. Have I ever done anything before? Do I have a great idea? No. As opposed to like, what's the idea that somebody already has? Can I make it slightly better? And then can I innovate on top of it? And so that's what I did. I just mimicked what they did in private equity and scaled from there.
How do you do that as a person if you don't have assets to start with?
Yeah. There's sort of 3 ways that you can get access to business ownership, in my opinion. The first is money, right? You can just go out, you can have your own money. The second is leverage, so debt. The cool part about a business is unlike a house, when you go to get a mortgage on a house, right? You got to have an income in order to qualify for the house. You can't just go, I want this house and I think the house is worth this, so give me this much money for it. It doesn't work. For a business, you can actually do that. If a business has a cash flow, that cash flow is worth something to the bank, plus its assets. You can go get a loan for that business if they want to sell it.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So you can go to the SBA, the Small Business Association. You could also get seller financing from the owner. Most small businesses get sold that way. And so that's the second way. So that's leverage. You could also raise from other people if you want to. But the third way that a lot of people don't think about is people who have money. You're a good example. You have money. You like your money to work for you, right? But do you want another job? Do you want to run another business? I'm going to guess no.
Oh, no. Not at this point, no.
Yeah. So what do you want instead? You're like, well, I wish I could just give money to this person who would run the business for me.
Yeah.
Which is an operator. And so there's this whole world of people who are competent, have time, and some expertise or a willingness to work, who I think are going to be the future of the next generation of ownership. It doesn't have to just be the people who have money. It can be the people who have time and a willingness to work. And so that group in particular, I'm trying to talk to today because, if you're working right now in an accounting firm where the owner of your business is 65 plus, you're, a senior accountant there, maybe you manage a team, why not start talking to the owner of the business and ask them, what's your plan? Do you ever plan on selling this thing? And if so, who would that be to? What's your structure? Would you at all be open to potentially me buying a business like this from you at some point? And what's astounding to me is how many times that happens and it just works because the owners don't have another solution and you're a trusted commodity. So that is how you get equity in a business without having to have a ton of cash.
Wow. I didn't know you could get a loan for a business without an income. That's true, without an income, as long as you can show that the business is operating.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll require a business plan for the business. So if you go to the SBA, they'll want to see you'll have to make a case like anything else.
Yeah.
You'll have to say, hey, I ran this business over here, or I ran this group, or I'm an engineer from Google, or, I have an engineering background and this is an engineering company. And then you put together a business plan explaining why you should be the person to run this business. But the SBA will absolutely do that. And then there are no rules to what a business owner can do. So there's many business owners that'll just shut down their business. I mean, the story that I've told a few times is that my Uncle Eb, who's based here, had a business. The business did millions of dollars, and they shut the business down because he got older and he didn't realize that they had a sellable asset. And, I think He passed, but I think if he was alive today, he would say, well, we had to wind it down. We did things slowly. Maybe it wasn't worth as much at the end. But if you catch it at the peak, when you know you're going to want to sell the business before you get tired and sick and, the market changes, we need to start getting owners to sell up here. And a lot of owners don't know that they can.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you learn all this throughout like working, you said, at Goldman Sachs and things? Is that where you learned about this?
Yeah. I mean, this is literally what all the richest people in the world do. I mean, if you go right now, the Forbes 400 list, and you look at the richest people in the world as a percentage basis, something like 28% of them are from finance. And a majority of those from finance are not from public stock investing, which is what people think. Mm-hmm. They're from some form of active investing and ownership directing companies. Like even Ackman, like he doesn't just go and place a bunch of bets on public stocks. Bill Ackman is an activist investor who goes and tries to take ownership and affect the outcome on a company. And so this is what the really rich do. They don't, by and large, go in their garage, come up with a crazy idea. They fund the people who do that after it's been proven. And then like we use all of our blood, sweat, tears, and difficulty on the part that's making no money. And then they come in as our savior to buy us out at the second we're like, I can't fucking take it anymore. And then they have the best part of the journey. And I think that's wrong. And I think more of us need to realize that's what happens.
This is so funny. This is so funny. I was talking to Jordan, so my husband, at the beginning of the year, and like making a plan for the next year is you make some goals and you can see what you've accomplished or whatever, something to work towards. And I was like, this is exhausting because we're building Peterson Academy. Yeah. I was like, this is exhausting. This is so much work. It's been so much work. It's been like 2.5 years now. We're about to launch. So we're there. But I was like, after this one and maybe another one, we'll see what I have like in me or what we have in us. But I was like, we have got to get to the point where we're just buying companies. Yeah. But I've found that the most difficult part of I haven't even looked at like regular companies, but trying to find people to run them is tricky.
Very.
I've tried. So even like I started out by running my dad's brand and just trying to grow that and doing social media and everything.
I think you did well.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a lot of sweat and tears. And
yeah. Did you get a bunch of equity in that thing?
No.
I hope so. Oh, Jordan.
I know, he runs a hard bargain.
I bet he does.
I was just like, I can do it. I think I can do it better. But over the last number of years, I've been like, okay, let's try to bring this person in. They seem pretty competent. Maybe they can just run it. And that hasn't worked. I don't know if that's a weird family dynamic thing. Maybe that's the reason. I find it's hard to find people to run complex things. You'd be like a dad's brand, social media brand. How complex is it? But there's like, it's complex. There's a lot of connections and like there's a lot going on. Yeah. It's hard to find people who are competent. That's the problem I've had. True. Well, but I suppose if you're just looking at companies that are already running, you can just look at them running and be like, well, it's already competent.
Well, I think there is a curse of lack of competency in general, which is a good and bad thing. It means that if you are slightly competent, you have very few people who will compete against you, as long as you are willing to do an irrationally longer and harder amount of work than anybody else. It's actually all it takes. And so people are like, what's the secret formula? It's like earlier mornings, later nights for longer than you're comfortable until you're actually good enough to work smart, not hard.
That's
not possible in the
beginning. It takes a while to get there.
It takes a while. And then at a certain point, your repetitions become so good that you can finally work smart while still probably having to work kind of hard, but not irrationally hard. But one of the things I've learned is, the first time you did a podcast, probably not the best podcast. And if you think about it with hiring, how many shots on goal do we get to hire A players? Mm-hmm. Maybe if you run really big companies, then you've hired people incredibly often and continuously in order to be able to see what the repetitions look like in order to pick the right person. But for most people, you don't have enough reps.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to be good at it. And so I've found this is where systems and processes come in. Like if you want to hire A players or you want to be an A player, there's like 3 things you really have to think about. And the first is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So if you're going to hire somebody for a role, have they already done the role, aka experienced talent? Do you know that they've already done the role, aka you know them personally and they've done some sort of project for you already? That's known talent. And then do they have exponential talent? Meaning, Are they steady state at what they've done previously, or are they growing with each role in order to have exponential growth? Because that's what you're going to want in a business. And so that's the first thing. Best predictor of future behavior, past behavior. The second thing that I've noted is for these high performers, you want to catch them having a history of success. And so a lot of times we think, oh, they had a hard time, but the boss didn't work out in the last one.
Yeah.
Oh, this didn't work out, but it's going to be better. Oh, they were looking for us the whole time. That's not your hire. Get them when they're on the uptick. Don't get them and try to fix them from being on a downturn. And so a lot of times we talk ourselves into that. It's happened to me often. And then the third thing I'd say is if there is anywhere where they have negative commentary, negative posts on Twitter, complaining in any way, shape, or form, immediate out. Because winners actually are too busy building to focus on burning down. And so if I had done that historically, if I had ignored people who had a negative stance and complained, if I had ignored people who weren't on the upswing of winning, and if I had ignored people that hadn't done the deal before, whatever the job was, I would have probably had incredible talent. And so next time, we have a little box at Contrarian Thinking Capital where we have all of our underlying companies, and the box has 5 characteristics in it. Every single employee that we go to hire gets ranked on those 5. And instead of like, I like the guy, I want to have a beer with him overnight in the airport, stupidest fucking question ever. You do not have to like people that work for you. You do not. You need them to be competent and you need them to be positive for the team, but you don't have to be besties. And so they have to go through this 5-step scoring mechanism. And if they don't score high enough, no matter what, for that role, we won't hire them. And so it's just ridiculous focus on process.
What can I know what these 5 steps are?
Yeah, totally. And I can send you the matrix afterwards so you
definitely.
can use it if you want to. So the first one is experienced talent. Have they already done the role? The second is known talent. Have we tested that they've done the role in some way, shape, or form? The third is size. So a lot of times if you go to hire somebody at a small company, but they've been at Google, there's a mismatch. Just because they did something incredible at Google doesn't mean they're going to be able to handle a startup. So I like them to have a size match.
Interesting.
Yeah, super, super important. The next one is, do they have an industry match? So have they actually worked, let's say that you're hiring a project manager, so that's experienced, right? He has the experience, he's been a project manager, but has he done it inside of a media company before? Or was he project manager inside of a SaaS company?
Yeah.
That's going to score differently. And then the last one is that component of like positivity or negative bias. So we do a social media screen on everybody. And if you are trolling people on Twitter, you're out. I don't care if you hit all of the other particulars. And so those are the 5 things we look at every single time.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
I think with Peterson Academy, our plan is eventually, like after we launch, to try and, because we've been having issues with developers, not really, like the developers have been great. It's just been slow finding the right people. So everything's just been slow and hard because we're a startup and we haven't put a lot of money in. We put enough money in, but it's just our own. We don't have like other people investing. So it's like, are we going to steal? Like once we're at that point, do we start stealing people from Google or Apple? But I like the size comparison.
I think you want...
So there's 40 people right now. That's how big the company is.
That's a lot. I mean, your video I saw was incredible. I thought the launch video for it was really well executed.
Yeah, and the courses, they look great.
Yeah. I think you want to go... I like to try to steal the best... I mean, there's an old saying, which is, if you think amateurs are expensive... I'm sorry, if you think pros are expensive, try hiring amateurs.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious, except it hurts. It viscerally hurts your soul when you have to pay pro level pricing, because they're expensive, but if you are really good at figuring out, hey, success in this role looks like this, and I can map out, if this person is successful, we can make this much money, then pay the pro.
Yeah.
And every time I don't do that, I regret it and I go kick myself.
Yeah.
You want to have some companies where you can help people on the come up, but I never want people at the executive level that are guessing. I don't want them learning on my dime. I want them learning on somebody else's, some other big company's dime, and then they can come into my company once they've kind of figured it out and grow within my company then.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up hiring someone who doesn't cost as much and then ends up being extremely expensive.
Very expensive. I mean, the average employee at Goldman Sachs costs Goldman Sachs $150,000 a year in training. And so that's average. So I don't know. I came in as an analyst, which was the lowest level you could be. I was a little peon when I was there. And I got a $150,000 education, and they paid me to get it, right? Same thing with the Vanguard, the company I was at before. I think, one, if you're young and hungry, go to a big corporation to start, because they plow money into you. It's soul sucking, but you're going to learn a lot. You're going to have a ton of training, and you won't have like a knife to your throat if you mess up like you will at a startup, because they literally can't afford mistakes. So it was the best training I ever had all those years in corporate America, even though I hated it. Just because you hate it doesn't mean it doesn't work.
So how did you get into that? You said you come from a background of journalism?
Yeah, I was covering human trafficking along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not a natural progression to finance,
yeah,
really.
No.
But I was thinking about going into law or politics. So I was taking a few pre-law classes I was at ASU, Harvard of the West over here. And
that's what people here call it. Yeah. I don't know. I'm from Canada. I don't know.
You don't know the difference. Yeah, it's a party school. It's like great for keg stands, not great for learning, probably. I think I took they're going to hate this. I took like a history of Elvis and the Beatles class.
Nice.
They both counted, you know. I had a great time though. But anyway, so at ASU, I really learned what I didn't like, which I think is what college is for. Like, I think I ended up leaving with like 3 degrees by the end, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. It was like political science first, then it was public relations, then it was journalism. And at the end, when I was doing the journalistic component, I felt like I would lose my soul a little bit if I went into journalism. Like, I would look forward to bad things happening because I'd be covering them, and that made me feel sick inside.
Yeah.
And so instead, I started realizing, like, instead of just covering stories, how do you change them? And I think the way that you change them is actually money.
Yeah.
So that's how I sort of just started climbing my way through money. And you know, I wish somebody had told me earlier that if you want to get good at a game, you go where the game is played. And it's as easy as that to start out when you're young, hungry, curious, and willing to work hard. I went to a Latinas in Finance conference that I didn't want to go to because I was late and I was hungover. And I remember being on the phone with my mom, and I was like, I'm not going to go to this conference. I don't want to, I don't feel good. And she was like, just go. Just go. You want to get into finance? Just go. And so I went and I sat next to this woman, and I had a nice conversation with her. And that's what allowed me to eventually get my foot in the door at Vanguard. And like, so if you're young, just go where the game's played, because competency is so rare. People pick up on it.
Yeah. Interesting. If you guys are not filtering your air, it is the easiest thing. It's the laziest thing you can do to improve your health. I'm so gung-ho about this. I literally travel with an air purifier for hotel rooms. Seriously. I've been talking about air purifiers for years, but I didn't realize how important they are until I stopped being able to think because of a very moldy house. Air Oasis is top of the line. The type of air filter you buy really matters, and Air Oasis filters down to the right particle size, which is why I'm suggesting them. Air Oasis has a new iAdapt air model. That's what I'd get. They have a medical grade H13 HEPA filter that filters down to 0.003 microns, which means they trap particles 10 times smaller than most other brands. They have germicidal UV technology to sterilize the air purifier itself and the environment. They also use a silver ion filter that penetrates the cell membrane of mold, bacteria, and viruses and reduces pathogens by up to 99%. I own a number of them. There's one in every room. They're also quiet. They come with free shipping, a lifetime warranty, and a 60-day money-back guarantee. You can get 10% off your purchase by using code MP at checkout by going to airoasis.com/product/iAdaptAir-large, or select the size you want with code MP for 10% off. That is linked in the description and in the pinned comment. Enjoy the rest of this episode. This is actually what I was thinking about a second ago. I was on Piers Morgan last year, and we were talking about why people want money, because people want money for different reasons. And I grew up and my family didn't have very much money. But I didn't really know that until I met other people. Then I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So it really wasn't obvious, but I had like student loans for university, and like, I remember this is when I was like debaucherous years. I was at a concert and I was really thirsty and I had no money, like literally $0. And I remember calling my brother and being like, can you transfer me $30? I'm like, I need a lemonade. Thanks, brother. But I was never like worried. I was never worried. So I wasn't at that point. I was just didn't have very much money. Yep. And I had odd jobs and just jobs from like grade 5 onwards. But I was talking about the reason that I wanted to make money and I wanted to grow things was for like 2 things. One, for stability in life, because it makes you more stable. And then when bad things happen, you have ways to fix it because you need money to fix things. But it's also to get to the level where you can actually change society.
Yeah.
I was like, that sounds interesting. And you can see all these problems. And I guess that's why people get into politics too.
Yeah.
But you can see where areas in the world are wrong. And in order to fix them, you can't just be at the bottom. You can't. No. And if other people can get up there, then why can't you get up there?
It's so true. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd rather have a seat in the boardroom than a sign outside the building.
Yeah.
You know, I remember being at Goldman Sachs during the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they were chanting like, you know, fuck the 1% and everything outside with all the signs and the tents. And what happened? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nobody went to jail. Nobody really even got serious fines for what happened during that. And yeah, they were loud, but they weren't very effective. And I think that's true with a lot of protests in general, is that, you know, young people feel like they need their voice to be heard as opposed to their work to be felt. And it's like, why don't you build something better instead of yell about what you hate? And the one's much harder than the other. But, you know, it kind of goes back to what you and your dad said. I resonated so much with that, like, clean up your room before you clean up the world thing. Because I see it so often in, you know, the companies that we have and the young people in it. I'm like, you don't even know how to read a balance sheet yet. You know, you're going to go change something? No, you've got to actually understand what the fuel of the world is. And if you don't understand that, it's very hard to make any substantive change. So I think you're right. Most people just want to be able to work where they want, with whom they want, on what they want, and spend time on the things outside of work that they want to spend time on. And increasingly, humans in the US do not have that option. Mm-hmm. You know, some of the statistics are fascinating to see how, you know, only 1 out of 10 Americans dies wealthy, which means excess money that they can pass on to the next generation. Most people die broke, alone, and overweight, like categorically in the US, which is pretty wild. And so we're not figuring out how to get people's core needs met because I think we're teaching them the wrong things. And people want that. And then once they get a level of financial freedom, the new studies and statistics say anything past $500,000 in annual income, you have a very serious drop off on happiness. And
that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
I remember, I think my parents had told me that statistic, but it was
Yeah.
maybe 15 years ago. And I think my dad had said something like 120,000. And I was thinking, that's not.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember my first job made $37,000 and I thought I was rich. I was like,
yeah.
I will buy everything in here. But yeah, I mean, I think the studies told us originally that they thought it was $100,000.
Yeah.
After $100,000, you drop off in happiness. It turns out that's not exactly true.
The people making those studies were making
Yeah.
100,000.
Yeah, exactly. They're like right about here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that you should relentlessly pursue your first $500,000 unapologetically in annual income. And after that, you can think about making real impact in what you do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with taking care of the house before you go try to build another one.
You'll also be taken way more seriously if you do that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you know how the game's played. Then you're in a different set of, you're in a different set of rooms with a different set of people.
Do you think, so you're trying to teach people this online. Do you think this is teachable, or is this something people have to be brought up with? Are there people who aren't able to do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. The 2 things. What I've realized, so I thought if I gave somebody a spreadsheet and I told them tactically how they could do this and the steps to take, awesome, they'd run with it. Then I realized absolutely not.
Yeah.
That doesn't really work. In fact, you have to have the fundamental belief that you are capable of doing it, the willingness to work extra hard, and the mental resiliency to keep going once it sucks and you run out of money and it's awful and you have no other paths and you can't imagine a way forward. And so I suppose if I had to think about 4 steps, that's how it goes. It's like, first, hey, I think I could do this. Somehow you have to build up a belief in yourself. And then second, it's, okay, I'm willing to do what it takes to get here. And then third is I'm willing to continue to do what it takes, aka resiliency. And then only once you have those first three steps can you actually even listen to a single tactic anybody tells you. And so I used to think that all the mindset, Tony Robbins sort of stuff was too fluffy. And now I realize it's incredibly important.
Yeah, that's exactly how I used to feel too.
Right? I was like, just tell me how to get there. Keep your woo-woo manifestation crystals to your fucking self. And now I'm like, I could take a crystal, you know? And most people need one. So yeah, I think you're right. I think, I've met a lot of humans who are not willing to do what it takes. I haven't met very many humans who are incapable mentally of doing it.
Okay. I feel the same way about that.
Yeah. I don't think there's like some IQ gap where I'm just like, wow, a majority of people are such complete idiots and they have no capacity for bettering their lives. I don't think that's true. But I think
some.
Yeah,
there might be a little bit of that.
It's probably the 80-20 rule, right? There's probably like 20% of people that just maybe from an IQ level can't actually progress.
Yeah.
Maybe. But for the most part, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably capable. And your biggest problem is you.
Okay, then here's another question. So I have, like, moving away from Toronto where all my friends were, my aspirations are definitely way higher, like and crazy high, enough that I talk to my friends and they'd be like, you're crazy. They're like, no, like, I think I can do this, or I think I can get to where I want to be. However, I'm not sure if that having those aspirations like ideal health for a human. Or because like there are people that they're doing less, they're much less stressed out, they have more time to do other things. Yeah. And so I think the older I've got, I've been like, so my brother, for instance, and he's an entrepreneur as well, and he has his own company, and it's successful, but he's not aspiring to like change the education system and the healthcare system and like ridiculous things. But he has like his nice little family and he's doing really well. I'm like, is it weird? Am I doing something wrong? And not that it matters because this is where I want to be, but I don't know if it's ideal for everybody or if it's even the right thing to do. Yeah. This is whatever makes you happy, I guess.
My brother's
miserable
the same way.
at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to have a level of, sort of like to be a striving human is pretty miserable often. I was just telling my brother this week. So my brother's similar. He's really smart. Yeah. And he categorically has said that he has no interest in doing things at the level that I do them.
Yeah.
He's incredibly self-aware to go, that sounds great. I'm glad you enjoy that. I have no interest whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I hope you're taking care of yourself, Codie. And he is probably pretty happy. But I do think there's a balance where I think humans, and a lot of the research seems to point to this, they need some sort of purpose in work. Labor seems to drive happiness in some way, shape, or form. So I think the people that believe that they want to hang out all day and Netflix and chill and go party with friends and that will make them happy are wrong by and large. Simultaneously, most people do not want to be outliers, which makes sense because outliers couldn't be normal for everyone. And so, I think I've never met an entrepreneur that doesn't have some sort of chip on their shoulder and something that they want to prove. And I do think, I was just talking to Arthur Brooks earlier this week, who I adore, and he's really big on this belief that workaholism? Yeah. Workaholism.
No, sounds good enough.
Sounds fine. Is just as detrimental as many other isms. When you become addicted
Same
to
kind
something.
of addiction-ish. I've seen that too in my family. Like my dad, we've talked to my dad about it too, is like he gets maybe too much dopamine from overworking enough that he can make himself ill. Yep. And it's like, you're working too hard if you're making yourself ill. And then I have the same thing, and I think I've got it under wraps a little bit more in the last couple of years, probably since getting married and meeting Jordan, actually, because he's taken a bunch off my plate. So that was really helpful. But it's the same kind of, am I getting too much dopamine from suffering through work, and are other areas of my life falling apart? But
answer yes often for me too.
yeah.
But you kind of like it.
Yeah.
I kind of go back and forth too. It's like, who says what you should or should not be doing?
Yeah.
and what drives your happiness. Where I think it is problematic is if you define yourself by your work and you feel less than because you do not achieve X or Y or Z, some sort of exogenous achievement, that's probably not good. If the only way that you define yourself is by other people's view of you and what you've been able to achieve, not great. If you love doing the thing for the thing, and that thing happens to be work, I don't find that any different than painting, writing, reading, hanging out. And so that's at least how I think about it. With my husband, I'm like, I do not want to bake sourdough bread and hang out in a sundress. And fuck yeah to the women who want to, but it would make me miserable. And so I do want to do this labor and work thing. But I imagine, as I get older, it definitely shifts. I know I don't want to work like I work right now for the next 50 years, but I'll never not work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find shoulds to be highly annoying. And I try to avoid shoulding on anybody or getting should on as much as humanly possible. And I do really have to be careful. And I think many people should try to be careful about like the definitions as success. I'm concerned a little bit with where the economy is going, for instance. I think we're starting to see the first signs. I see it in a lot of my businesses. I was dealing with fires all last week regarding it. And what I worry about is I remember 2008 vividly when, a few people that I knew tangentially in finance committed suicide. And I think it was because, they were men defined as a protector and a provider and stopped being able to provide and protect because lost their job, plus lost a lot of money, plus lost status. Oh. And that spirals quickly to complete loss of self. And so I do worry about that. Like, do not wrap yourself in your success. Wrap yourself in maybe how hard you work and what you do day to day, but not the outcome because you can't control that.
So what are the patterns you're seeing now compared to 2008?
Well, leverage has a trickle-down effect on the economy. And so when I think about what's going to come, I try to not crystal ball it, and I instead say, go to the area first that has the most leverage, because that will show signs of distress first. So I think the economy is going to fall, and it already is, because we had our most levered industry, aka venture capital, have its biggest pullback it's ever had. We're going to have zombie funds and startups that were going to be unicorns that will fade away into nothingness. And we've already seen a lot of portfolios get marked down 20, 50, 60%. And that's because, imagine, what do venture capitalists do? You go, I got an idea. And they go, cool, here's a bunch of money for your idea, which makes no money whatsoever, and you're going to burn money for years. High leverage. Then we have the second highest leverage, which is commercial real estate. We have commercial real estate have super high debt to leverage ratios. And the crazy part is they never mark them down because that hurts their overall portfolio. So even though right now it might only be worth 40 cents on the dollar, they're not reporting that. So that'll be the next thing to fall. Mm-hmm. And in 2008, it was the housing crisis. Mm-hmm. And that was just because that was where there was the most leverage. So I'm starting to see it. People can make money in any environment and any economy, but you have to be ready for it and try to have more cash than you think you should.
Do you think this will get reversed depending on the next election? But then I guess it'll take a time to catch up.
Yeah. The government can definitely continue to put its foot on the accelerator by determining to keep printing money and to keep rates low artificially. But at some point, the music has to stop and we notice that there are not enough chairs. And so whether it is this year, the next 4 years, the next 10 years, I'm not sure. But, the funny thing about math is it's hard to manipulate. And so if we continue to spend more than we take in and we continue to inflate the economy, a balloon only goes so far before it's going to pop of its own accord. And so I'm not sure, but there's definitely a concern that people don't pay enough attention to the economy right now.
But you think owning companies, this is the way to go anyway?
I think about what an economic downturn is. It's basically people stop spending as much money. People stop making as much money, right? And what you basically need to be able to protect against is both of those things. How do you do that? Well, when you own a company, you can increase your prices. So you have like a lever there. You can sell more things. You can, not have as many people work for you. You can have decreased labor cost. It's just one of the most flexible things you can own. Yeah. You can't really flex on salary. You can't really flex on real estate ownership and it making you more or less. And so in times of distress, I want optionality. You want the ability to know that there are 5 paths you could take as opposed to only one. And what if that one's blocked? And so that's why I like ownership.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, question I randomly had. What's the difference between angel investing and venture capitalism?
Not a lot. Angel investing is just individuals who aren't institutions. And venture capital is institutions. So you could angel invest in a deal and be like, hey, friends and family, I'm going to invest in Codie's new water bottle company because we're friends and I kind of like it and I think I could make some money. And then a venture capital fund would be Codie runs a fund of other people's money and is more institutional, more serious, but basically does the exact same transaction, typically at a higher level and later what's called rounds. So first you usually have your friends and family or angel round. Then you might have what's called a seed round. So that's like getting your first couple dollars either from them or from a venture company. Then you have series A, B, C, D, E, etc. Each round getting more expensive and more serious or sophisticated.
Interesting. And so did you just start your company with other people you knew in finance, basically?
I started my company with my own money. I think,
cool.
If you were going to go out today, like if you don't have money right now, it has never been easier to start a company. Now, it's never been easier to have a more profitable company. It's never been harder to have a more profitable company. So there's really there's an ease to start, a hard to profit gap today if you're running your own business. Something like less than 1% of companies ever hit $10 million in sales. It's a very small amount of companies that ever hit it. But the good part about that is it's cheaper than ever to start a company. So if I lost every single dollar I had right now, and I couldn't even really use my connections, I could just use my knowledge to make my first $1 million, it would be on the internet. I would take the money that I have, which would be, let's call it $500, and I would learn as much as I humanly could about some sort of industry, probably in the sales profession. And I'd go try to sell other people's things until I saw what thing was easiest to sell. What do people already want so that I don't have to make up demand? I would make as much income as I could selling other people's stuff. I would stockpile that. And then I would take it and I would try to compete with the thing that was most expensive and easy to sell. And these days you can do it all online. You could do pre-orders for a product you haven't even created yet and drive all the demand. So I don't think there's a lot of excuses. There's a lot of overwhelm. Like there's so many ways to do it. There's so many things to do. Which one's right? And that commitment is difficult, I think.
It's also fun that you can learn from people online now. Like you can't learn this stuff in university, right? Did you take business courses?
I mean, yes, but I went in. I got an MBA, and it was from Georgetown, not a bad school. But no, I learned basically theory. I think you and I have a similar mission. My mission is I want to change education for money and bring it into the 21st century.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
Yeah, and I think universities today are way too expensive.
Yeah,
and they're taught by theorists as opposed to practitioners.
Yes.
And that is not always bad, except in money, it's really bad. Because if you've never actually built a company, bought a company, sold a company, but you're telling somebody theoretically how to do it, not a great look. Mm-hmm. And so we built what's called the Contrarian Community and our education institute, basically with this one idea. Can we actually make M&A, mergers and acquisitions, accessible, applicable, and can we have practitioners teach everyday people how to do it for a fraction of the price? And with technology, you can. It's incredible. You can have hybrid universities that are 1/100th of the cost and yet have good screens so that only really curious and serious people want to come in. And so we're pushing on that aggressively right now. But what's weird is that it has to be like educational lobbying or some sort of belief. People think that courses and communities that are online are bad, which always makes me chuckle. Because I wish that I could have learned this without having to spend 10 years.
It's so hard to pick out who's just selling bullshit. It's
that's
so
probably
hard.
why.
Like I had someone, he was coming here to fix the house and he was like, oh, you guys make money off of the internet. And we're like, yeah, okay. That simplifies it, but sure. And he's like, oh, well, I want to work from home too. I was like, okay, a little bit more goes into it than that. But he was like, he'd spent thousands and thousands of dollars on courses from people. And I was like, well, do you have an idea? Do you have anything you want to sell? And he's like, he didn't have anything. He was just buying courses from people being like, this is how you make a bunch of money. Ugh. And I was like, that's not for you.
Did he apply it?
I doubt it. I think he was just buying them being like, well, maybe it's easy. I can work from home and I don't have to do as much.
Oh yeah, that's not
Like,
a great
that's not
look.
how it works.
No, no.
But I think it's tricky because I feel like I still have the mindset that when I see a course online, I'm like, that's not real.
Yeah.
That's how they got rich. Get rich selling courses. And we're like, that's how I made my money. I was like, that's not real.
I think that's very normal. I used to also think that masterminds and communities were
Oh yeah, me
weird.
too. I've changed my mind on that.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's a sheen to it. There's there's a veneer that I don't love, but man, I mean, I spent a lot of money on school. Georgetown was like, I don't know how many 100,000 plus. I ended up getting it paid for by State Street when I worked at that company, but it was expensive. And when I look at what I got out of it, what did they tell you that you were going to get? They're like, if it's not the knowledge, it's the network. I'm like, wait a second. We are all like, late 20 somethings trying to figure it out. We're all in the, please teach me, please help me phase. Nobody in there is in the, I've already made it, I've already figured it out, let me hand down to you phase. So why is that the network that I would want? I would want to be in a network where there's a bunch of people who are higher up than I am. And so I think that's the benefit of these online communities. But you're right. I mean, anytime there's no barrier to entry to it, you have bad players and no institutionalization. And so it'll be interesting. I'm sure in the future there will be ways for all of this stuff to be tracked and ranked, kind of the same way that we've done with universities.
Oh, definitely. That's coming.
Yeah.
That's definitely coming.
Which I think is actually a great move for the market. It's really good to see what works, what doesn't. But I think people are crazy if they don't take advantage of the fact that for the first time ever, people who have already achieved a bunch of stuff are willing to tell you how to do it.
That's what's been insane with building Peterson Academy and inviting people on the platform. We're like, we've got the marketing, so the courses are going to reach a ton of people. Do you want to teach something you really want to teach people? And there are people who've started billion-dollar companies that are like, yes, here's how you do business.
100%.
It's like the fact that you can get the CEO or the founder of a billion-dollar company to say, this is how you do it. That's crazy. Like that was not accessible, 10 years ago? Less?
Yeah.
5? Like it's been pretty recent.
10,
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you would read the books, but you're like, this is like a novel. This isn't, I want to know steps 1 through 12. And I also want to be able to see, I think a lot of times when people reach the top of the mountain, when you go to ask a billionaire how to do something and you're at the beginning of the mountain,
they don't remember.
They don't remember.
Yeah.
And so, talking to a billionaire is incredible for one thing, which is opening up your worldview. I have one who's a mentor of mine that invested in one of my companies. And every time I'm with him, he's always like, why are you thinking so small?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a big idea, and he's like, not so much.
Yeah.
So they're great for that. But if I was to say, how do I start a business for the first time and make my first $100,000?
For sure.
No way. So I think you need both. You need like 3 levels of mentors, like somebody who's probably even a little bit below you, who's like young, they know technology, they know what's coming. And then you need somebody at your level. You guys can sort of riff off each other. You're both striving and going. And then you need somebody that's ahead of you. But for some reason, we only want this. We don't realize we kind of need all 3.
Yeah, that's funny. Do you think there are ways to skip steps? Or do you have to go? Because like, at least from my experience, I've gone from, oh my gosh, I was delivering newspapers in grade 5. That's a terrible job and nobody should do it. And it was
especially
a total scam.
In Canada, you were probably cold.
It was cold. It was like, it was ridiculous. It was like, I was in the 60s. I got like 5 cents a newspaper or something. It was definitely like something was wrong with that. And my parents were just like, go for it. And I was like, I need to make money for some reason. But do you think there's a way to skip some of the like delivering newspapers, working as a waitress, building yourself, slowly learning? It's so slow to learn. Yeah. Or can you skip to the, I'm just going to learn how to buy companies and then buy companies?
That's a great question. I mean, I do think we lost. Here's what my answer would be. If you want to skip the line, do what other people are not willing to do. And what would that be? Well, that would be go apprentice for somebody for free.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the 5-cent newspaper job, which
Yeah.
I understand people will then say, well, I don't have enough money, so I can't do that. And I will say, can you question that assumption? What if the fastest way for you to get to where you want to go is for you to see somebody else every single day working to achieve the thing that you already have, and they have it and they're willing to teach you? And so I think it's a huge disservice actually in the US that we got rid of apprenticeship.
I know.
Huge.
Yeah.
Because that's actually the fastest way for you to move forward. And let me tell you what, interns and an internship, they are not worth the money that you pay them. That is a charity that you get interns and have them come in because they don't know anything yet. Same with me. I interned for free in political campaigns here. I interned at the Rule 11 Mental Health and Competency Court because I wanted to learn about mental health back in the day. Terrible job.
That sounds terrible.
Oh yeah. I remember how many times they peed in the defendant's box. And
That's so sad.
Yeah, it was
That's
not
heavy.
It was heavy.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I probably wasn't that helpful at all, but I learned a lot. And so if you actually want to learn, I think the fastest thing that you could do is try to cozy up to somebody that already has it and then work way harder than you think is reasonable for way less money than you think is reasonable. And then you could probably skip years of the shitty bartending job, but you might have to do 1 or 2 of the shitty bartending job while you do this other thing. I don't know that there's any other way around that.
No, I don't know either.
Yeah. I mean, you could go, like theoretically, could you go today and you could go to a podcast production studio as a young gun and say, hey, you know, I'd love to buy your business with seller financing and, you know, you might want to retire soon. Would you be open to that transaction? You could do that, but then you're going to get the business and you're going to be like, the fuck am I going to do with this? You know, I don't know anything about anything. And so I'm not sure there's any way to get around that. What do you think?
Apprenticeship. I like the apprenticeship. I think the difficulty I would have had there is I didn't have connections at all. So what do you do? Like I went to, take me for example, I went to an art school, which was a mess in Toronto, just like public art school. And then I went to like multiple universities. I didn't even know the business realm existed as a concept. Like my mom stayed at home and she was a massage therapist. And my dad taught at university and he had his own like business, although that didn't really take off until he, you know, he blew up and then it took off. He worked flat out, but his like line for me was always get a PhD in something and teach it.
Wow.
Which was like, no, now that I know more, like absolutely not. No offense to those people, but like that's not going to get me where I want to be. So I didn't have business connections. The only people I knew were intellectuals that didn't own businesses. Yeah. So what do you do if you graduated high school and you're like, well, maybe I'm interested in finance. I'm going to go apprentice somewhere, but I don't know anybody.
Yeah. I mean,
just like wear a suit and show up and like talk to people until someone's like, yeah, I guess you can hang around for free.
Yeah. I do think people who've achieved a lot of money find a lot of inspiration from young people who want to be like them.
Yeah.
You know, so once you've already achieved, when somebody comes up to you, and I don't mean achieved like at your and my level, I mean, go to like the 50, 60, 70-year-olds, because that's when relevancy starts to fade. They're on what's called the second cycle, right? So they've already achieved their wealth. They've already sort of won, and they're in sort of a relevancy decline. And so during that period, if you're a young gun and you go to somebody who's 60 or 70 and had some success, they are looking for relevancy again. And that is your way in. And, you know, one way I did this when we were younger is I went to some of my parents' richest friends and asked them if there was anything I could do for them. Like, I just knew that they had money because they had nice cars and like a nicer house than we did. And I basically just said, can I be your bitch? And she was like, yes, you can. And so I just learned from watching them. I learned what they did. I learned that, like, you know, for instance, you know who this is, has like a tractor and equipment rental company. And I was like, wait a second. So you can rent out these machines and you rented it from somebody else to then just rent it to somebody else for more money? That's a thing. and that made you this much money, you know, like it was very, very rare for me. And so if you don't have anybody in your school or network or friends, then maybe just like pick the biggest houses on your block and dress up in a suit and go knock on doors and tell them what you're trying to do. And like probably 9 out of 10 of them are going to tell you to pound sand. But I bet one of them goes, that's wild. You're 15 or 16 and you want to learn this stuff? Okay, let me give you a shot.
Probably give you something small to start and just judge you on how you accomplish that.
Yeah. And I think especially today where so many people aren't willing to do that. And once you have a lot of wealth too, like your kids aren't always as hardworking as you were, seems to be the trend. And so a lot of times these people are looking for who's gonna take over all this? Who's gonna do it next? So you might even luck in on something pretty wild if you're willing to work irrationally hard.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson. Okay. Last question here. What's your plan for the future? Like you said, you had huge aspirations. You've already accomplished a bunch of those, but what's next?
Well, I have a book coming out this December, and that will be interesting for me because I think a lot of people learn from doing the thing that is rare today, which is putting a book in front of your face, reading all the way through it, and taking some notes. And so I'm hoping that this becomes really accessible for just about anybody. So that book will be coming out. I'm pretty excited about that.
What are you teaching people in the book?
It's about how to buy businesses. Shocking.
Nice. Okay.
Shocking.
No, that's super helpful though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's how to buy businesses and this idea of there's these three waves happening in the US that are making this, in my opinion, our industrial revolution, our generational wealth creation event, which is baby boomers retiring. They own most small businesses. This young generation wants more. They don't want to work in the traditional corporate field. And all these big corporations are buying up businesses everywhere. So with that, like those tidal waves kind of meeting in the middle, we have a unique moment in time to capture it. And not just for you to get rich and make money, but because I truly think, you've been to a Starbucks lately, like shitholes. I mean, no wonder their earnings are down so badly.
Yeah.
And why is that? That used to be the fourth or the third place, right? Which was, you had your house and your work, and then you went somewhere else that like felt like another home. That was the premise of Starbucks and why they did so well. And then they became too big, they got too much money, and they sucked the soul out of the third place. And I think that's happening all over our country. You only have to go a few minutes from where you live here to the suburbs to see, these corporate retail commercial strips devoid of all humanity. And I think that is a travesty. And I think a small business where you own it, your neighbors go to it, it's located in your community, is always going to feel more human than another chain that the private equity head has never stepped foot in because they're located in New York and you're in Scottsdale, Arizona. And so it's really this call to arms of, yes, you can make an irrational amount of money from buying a small business, but maybe you could also have a better, more meaningful life and you could help the country. And so we're going to have that book come out. And then we're going to build a lot of stuff on the back of it, which you'll see. We have a big SaaS company I bought that will be announcing some stuff this summer about how to make it more accessible for people to buy and sell businesses.
Cool.
It's so easy right now for you to buy real estate. Like think about it. You go on Zillow, you go on Redfin, you get a couple clicks, you understand everything about it. I think buying businesses will be a version of that, maybe not quite as easy in the next 10 years. And so we're going to build things to do that. Instead of me owning all the businesses, I want to democratize people's ability to own them, because then I'm no better than Starbucks if I just go out and all I do is, if I don't teach, I just buy, I don't create tools to allow for more easier buying, then how am I any better than Blackstone? I'm not. And so I don't want, private equity billionaire on my tombstone at all. I kind of saw what those guys are like later in life, and I don't want any part of it.
Interesting. Oh, that's so cool.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Okay, definitely send me a book when it's out.
I will.
Yeah.
I just picked the cover. I'll show you it after this.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Also, cover picking is horrific. Are you writing a book?
I am. I'm actually finally finishing it up now. It took a number of it's kind of a memoir about health things and then businesses and what happened to my dad, and just everything in my life has been so dramatically weird, movie-like, that I'm
and
okay.
Hard.
Yeah, every time something bad happens, I'm like, whoa, it's gonna be a good chapter in the book. But literally, that's part of what gets me through it. I'm like, who does this happen to? No, how many times? You know, I've been extorted. Do people normally? I was like, how many times? I've 3 times. I was like, why does it keep happening? And call my friend and be like, it's happening again. This is like a movie. This is does this happen to people? Anyway, it's going in a book. It's coming out, but I had to live longer.
Yeah.
Because I started writing it when I was 17 because things were already messed up by that point. And then it just never had a good ending. I was like, this is just and then a family member was dying, the end. There's just never an end part. So I think we can put the end in. This is a good period.
Now
we're going to write it now before something else happens. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a labor of love writing a book, but I do think it's an important milestone for people who love writing.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, where can people find you online?
Codie Sanchez on all the socials, and then contrarianthinking.co if you're into buying businesses. There's two free newsletters there that are all about how to buy, sell, build, grow businesses. So check those out.
Cool. Okay. And we'll link all the socials in the description.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you.